me as a business leader, I didn't know that it was the right call. All I could do was say, I think this thing isn't working and that thing looks like it would be better. There's that dangerous kind of valley in the middle where I come from tech and I want it to happen in 2 days, but I'm far enough away that I've lost sight of the actual details that make it take 2 weeks. And learning how to delegate and hire and agree on ownership and deliverables, those are the challenges. When we were starting, we built financial models that show up and to the right everything, like I'm sure every startup does in year one. None of them came true, the way we modeled them. But somehow, year by year, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 10 steps forward, 2 steps back, up. It's not a smooth curve, but we got so much farther than we had any right to believe that we could get to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fintech Leaders, coming to you from New York City. I'm your host, Miguel Armaza. I'm a co-founder of Gilgamesh Ventures, a venture capital fund that backs seed-stage fintech entrepreneurs in the US and Latin America. If you enjoyed this conversation, I invite you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows so more people can learn about fintech leaders. In this episode, I sit down with Doug Ricket, CEO and co-founder of PayJoy, a global fintech with $400 million in annualized revenue that provides credit to over 10 million customers across Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Founded in San Francisco in 2015, PayJoy reached profitability in 2023 and has raised almost $200 million in equity financing from USV, Core Innovation, Greylock, Invus, and the NX. We discuss how his years at the Peace Corps in Africa shaped him and fueled the ambition to work with emerging markets, lessons on building your team and the importance of the first 10 hires of a startup, strengths and weaknesses on the transition from engineer to company CEO, why in startups there are no magic elves and you have to do all the work by yourself, and a lot more. Doug, welcome to Fintech Leaders.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me here.
I'm very excited. Like we were chatting offline, I've followed PayJoy for years. I have a lot of friends working at the company. And so for me, it's been a long time coming, but I'm glad that you join us very enthusiastically, very quickly. So thanks for joining all the way from California, from SF, I assume?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Delighted to be here. Where are you?
I'm in New York City. What I say is the capital of fintech, but I'm sure you disagree.
No, I get out to New York. It's maybe world capital of finance. So definitely a important place for us.
Yes. Doug, I want to start off the bat with a question I heard while doing my research. And you were at Google before, and I learned that you built a zip line between 2 buildings that wasn't necessarily up to code, putting it lightly.
I have to say, how did you dig up this dirt on me? You've got some real sleuthing abilities.
I've been doing this for a while.
Okay. No, cool. There may be a webpage still out there about it that a friend of mine posted. Yeah, I mean, for me, Google was an awesome time of life. A bunch of us techies were there living the dream. And we were just screwing around on the whiteboard one day. And I think in the first design of it, there were piranhas or something in the little creek that separated the buildings. And we just drew, hey, here's a zip line. And then it could have been just talk, but this was the fun about the people there. We're like, hey, we could actually do this. And so, one Saturday, I think we went to Home Depot and bought some metal cable and carabiners and clips and stuff, and went out and clipped one side on a tree on one side and clipped the other side around a different tree. And so we had version 1.0 alpha or version 0.1 alpha. And then someone had access to a machine shop and went and machined like a more stable little trolley thing that rolls across. So it got better. And it was super fun. We had a bunch of people going back and forth for like a week or two. We had some people crash into the creek, into the mud. It was terrible to watch, but nobody got super hurt. I think one of my friends who was with me on it had texted Sergey Brin to come down and give it a try. But just on the day before, we got shut down by facilities. This thing is not safe and legit. But then Google built a real bridge across, so you can visit that bridge from kind of the main campus 43, building 43 over the creek. There's a real bridge now, but before the bridge, there was a zip line and there was a plank bridge made out of a couple pieces of wood.
Your voice was heard and they actually built a bridge. Is that your engineering mind at work? Is that an example of that? Like, you're an engineer by training, right? You were, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you in the Google Maps team?
Yeah, that's right. And so I think that was just kind of that fun spirit back then. Hey, we can have an idea and we can build it. We can create something from nothing. I remember before Google Maps, I had been in the Peace Corps. I can share more about that if you like.
Please do.
One thing that stuck with me there, the second year I was at Peace Corps, I was teaching at the University of the Gambia, and my boss was the dean of science and math. And she taught me this incredible lesson about creating something. And she asked me, I forget if it was the first semester or the second I was there, to teach this numerical analysis class, which is like kind of computation meets calculation and modeling the error bounds. Going back to the foundations of this stuff were like Isaac Newton method of solving an equation numerically. And I sort of knew this stuff tangentially, but I hadn't taken a class all about it. I hadn't taught a class all about it. We had no textbook available, and we didn't have the software. The software, MATLAB, is a commercial software, and they didn't have any budget. And so I told her, like, I haven't even taken this class. We don't have a book. We don't have the software. Sorry, we can't do it. And she told me, well, the math majors won't be able to graduate this year because they don't have enough courses. So could you try to find a way somehow? And so I'll cop to some copyright infringement here. I got my parents to buy a book in the US, scan the book, email me the scans I needed, printed them out, used that as our book. I found a free software called Scilab, and we made it work. I went through and worked all the problems in the book, and then I was able to teach them, and the math majors got another course, and they graduated. And really, I wouldn't have thought it was possible, but that the dean of the department told me, you have to create something from nothing. And that really stuck with me. It's such a powerful idea that she shared with me. Create something from nothing. Or at PayJoy, we have a PayJoy principle we call breakthrough walls, which means it looks impossible. It actually looks like you can't do this, but some creativity, some teamwork, make it happen. So back to Google, the zipline, that was just fun fooling around. We had a great time with it. It's great people. Some of them work with me today at PayJoy. It's been amazing to build those relationships over time. But I'd go back actually tie it back to the dean in Peace Corps who said, you can create something from nothing. And that's an amazing thing. And people without the resources that we have here in a rich company, sometimes they have even more practice finding ways to create something from nothing because they have a lot more nothing.
Yeah. Scarcity really drives innovation, right?
Yeah. Necessity, the mother of invention.
I love that. How did that feel, like seeing those students graduate?
It's incredible. They're incredibly talented. And I feel like it's like people who train or grow up in high altitude and then they can become elite runners. I think Ethiopia is famous for many elite runners around the world and these high altitude environments. And what I mean is where it's resource starved and the people who you find succeeding there. One of the students, actually multiple of them I know, went to the UK, did a PhD. One of them was Oxford PhD. Coming from the first year I was in Peace Corps, I was in a smaller town upcountry. And I remember this group of kids in my grade 12 physics class who would go study at this government building at night because it was the only place that got electricity. And it's like they're working so hard just to have electricity that they don't have at home. Like when you put them in a research-richer environment, they can really do amazing things.
Yeah. So we're going to talk obviously about PayJoy. You are serving customers in about 8 countries, if I have it correctly. And I know Africa is within that list, and there's a few countries from Africa that you're serving. But going back to those Peace Corps days, did that stuck in your brain, that experience saying like, oh, maybe I could come back here one day and do business? Or has it been kind of like a nice surprise over the years for you to go back and do business with Africa?
Yeah, it's been super rewarding. I feel so fortunate that I found a way to connect back to the African continent, which has a very special place in my heart. I mean, I grew up as a techie here in Silicon Valley, in love with everything tech, all that through to MIT, computer engineering, had a great time. People were really in love with their tech thing. And then for me, I just felt like I had to see the world a bit and find my place in the world, which is why I joined the Peace Corps. I spoke a little bit of bad Spanish. I thought they'd send me in Latin America, but they do a lot in Africa. And so they sent me to West Africa, to the Gambia, as a volunteer teacher. And that, I'd say, really created kind of a second foundational anchor for my life, for what I've wanted to work on, and found a few ways to do that in international development. And that, I think, for me, it goes back to actually the first 3 months of training. So Peace Corps is typically a 2-year service. And the first 3 months of training, they sent us to these super remote, small, rural villages. So I was in this little village, maybe 400 people in the whole village, no electricity, no running water. My host family spoke no English. And actually crossing the language barrier was a huge piece for me in being able to connect with my host family and build this relationship. My 10-year-old brother in the host family became my walking dictionary. And I'd walk around the village. I learned how to say, "What's that?" in Wolof. Lilanla. I pointed out all these things. He'd tell me, "Lolu pitila, lolu kajla, lolu hinla." And I wrote myself a dictionary on paper from talking to this kid. And it was incredible. We had a Peace Corps tutor also who would teach us grammar. And by the end of not even 3 months in, I could have conversations with my host family about real things, about serious things, money. And I said, in America, sometimes even when people have money, they're still not happy. And my host mother says, no, here, money is happiness. When you have money, you are happy. And there's so much there, right? I mean, I wouldn't notice if you took $100 out of my bank account. For them, $100 is, can they feed their children well this month? Can they put shoes on their feet? Real major impact that we could start to scratch the surface of. And then goofy stuff too. They were big into jokes. So I shaved my head at one point. My nickname became Egghead. My host mother's name sounded kind of like frogs. When the rainy season came, all the frogs came out. So my nickname for her became Frog Mom. So by the end of that first 3 months of training in Peace Corps, the serious conversations and the joking conversations for me built a relationship with that family living in this super rural, no electricity, no running water village. That was really, that relationship for me really created this anchor in West Africa. And really it stuck with me throughout my life of thinking, how can I connect to that other half of the world that's getting left behind? And how can I connect them to technology that is giving us a great quality of life? And that's a big part of PayJoy as well, that I'm glad we found a way to work on that.
Tell us about the early days of PayJoy, maybe even pre-day zero. How long were you marinating on the idea? And I know that you started with a business model, but then you pivoted. So would love to hear your take.
Yeah. Let's see. Do you mind if I go back in time a little bit and fill in between Peace Corps to PayJoy?
Even better.
It all kind of ping pongs to get me there. So let's see. You talked about Google Maps. I loved Google Maps. I went there after Peace Corps, and I ended up working on the internationalization. So helped from 2005, helping from the earliest days of Google Maps through to completing the world map. So we ran a project we called Map the World. I was sending people around the world to Cambodia and Kazakhstan and Chile to complete the digital map. We did it. By 2008, we declared victory. Every city over 100,000 population in the world mapped. And I thought it was my dream job. I mean, it was awesome. International meets technology. And then something that pushed me to get more directly involved, we visited my African host family, who I mentioned earlier, a couple times. I brought some Google colleagues. I brought my future wife. Unfortunately, on that second trip, we found one of the kids had been injured in a real tragedy. The little brother of my dictionary kid had been hurt in a farm accident and lost one foot, which is awful. I mean, now I have kids and it's hard to even think about, but it stuck with me there. I mean, this village has no electricity, no running water, no modern medical care. I realized also no electricity means no phone. to call the ambulance that's at a town 15 minutes away. And so actually, no, electricity means kid with one foot for the rest of his life. And it really stuck with me. And so then I came back to California, my dream job at Google, fun projects. We're building the zip line. We're mapping the world. And it was a little bit off, like something was missing. And I think for me, I felt like, hey, I'm not serving this family that I say is my inspiration for working on international, my Peace Corps host family. I'm not serving them at all. They don't have internet. They don't have electricity. They don't have a computer. What am I doing? So I think I was hungry, looking for something, a way to get more directly involved. That showed up with a good friend of mine from high school, Ned Tozin, was one of the founders of a company called D-Light. And I had seen them at Stanford when they were just a student group. Then they hung out in Mountain View for a year building prototypes in a garage. And then they went abroad and they were doing this thing, building these solar products for people in emerging markets. They were starting with India as a sales market. My buddy moved to China to set up production. And I was just like, hey, how can I help bring this to Africa? So my wife and I moved to Africa we started our first business together, which was a wholesale distributor of my friend's solar products. And it was this incredible adventure. I caught the bug for entrepreneurship, like every day, waking up, however hard I can work, whatever good ideas I can have, and roll the dice, get some luck. If all those come together, we can make some progress. And that's where I found the idea that led to PayJoy, which was affordability. So a customer would look at this solar kit in a box and say, this is wonderful, but it doesn't fit. It's a good value, but it doesn't fit my financial situation. And that was people would pay these small, flexible payments, just a few coins. You can give a few coins to a kid to go buy some candles or buy a cup of kerosene. If you're in Asia, it was candles where we were in West Africa. Small and flexible means if you want to have a party, you burn 10 candles. If you want to conserve, you burn one. If you have no candles, you can sit in the dark. And guess what? Tomorrow's a new day. The sun comes up. Go find some money tomorrow. Super flexible, small flexible payments was missing. And so my idea was, could we bring small flexible payments to our product? And so I joined D-Light to run product and engineering and came up and commercialized this idea of pay-as-you-go solar. We put a mobile communication chip in the solar system that would talk to our cloud server, check if the customer has paid their bill on time. If not, the lights turn off. Because the light turns off, the customer is motivated to pay $1, turn the lights on for another day, and suddenly you have pay-as-you-go. Pay $1 a day, pay $5 a week. And it fit what the customer was looking for. It fit how they like to manage their money, and it worked. And I think that has been a huge part, left a huge impression on me, seeing D-Light make all this huge progress. They've reached their 100 million customer goal in the last decade. I think now they're up to like 160 million lives affected. That counts the whole family getting light through these solar systems. And the pay-as-you-go, that's really another way of saying financing. I hadn't grown up with financing. I came from the tech side of Fintech, but I saw the financing made such a huge difference in people being able to afford the technology. So that was the inspiration for PayJoy. For me, a few years later, did another couple startups, went to business school, and then with a business school classmate, Gib Lopez, we said, hey, can we do this pay-as-you-go financing for any electronic device in the world, not just solar in Africa, but smartphones, laptops, TVs, dishwashers, washing machines, all this stuff that gives us a fun, wonderful quality of life. It looked to me like about half the world would love that stuff, of course. But the cool thing was it looked like they could afford it if we gave them $1 a day payment plan. And so that was the inspiration for PayJoy. And then we started with phones. And from there, we generalized it to loans, credit that customers can use for anything.
I think sometimes people forget that access to credit and, of course, responsible credit actually leads to opportunities, right? And then I think that's kind of what you guys are pushing forward. Tell us about building a team. I mean, you started with sounds like your MBA classmate, but obviously you've had to recruit people from all over the world. You went back to some Google colleagues, but for those entrepreneurs listening and then thinking about bringing together their first 5, 10 employees, what was important then for you, and what do you think you got right?
So for building a team, I think at the very beginning, if I think of the first 10 people who joined me for PayJoy, more than half were pre-existing relationships. And so I was fortunate. I knew some amazing people from Stanford, from Google, where that institution had done a bunch of vetting for me already. So I could tap that network. So that's a real advantage. I would advise any founder to tap whatever networks they have a way into, college, business, people you know from your hometown, like anything. And I felt occasionally a little awkward about it, even a number of years later, let's say about 2 years ago. So maybe like 7 years into the company, I recruited another classmate. I was an awesome product leader and a friend. And I was worried, here's my friend. First, the two questions I asked myself were, is this person really a good fit for the business, or are they just a friend? Important to get that right. I convinced myself, yeah, this person is awesome. I had them interview with other people to confirm that. And then I was afraid, am I going to risk my personal relationship on business? At some point, we're going to be fighting over something. Like my brother worked with PayJoy the first year. It got to the end of the year. We were just arguing. And I think we came to the feeling of we wanted to be loving brothers and have our kids play together at Thanksgiving and not be arguing about the tech stuff at midnight. And so we split apart at that point. But he gave me a year, my brother gave me a year of launching the company that I could not have done without him. There would be no PayJoy, except that he happened to be a place in his career where he could come over and help build something. And so he's a core creator of PayJoy. And my colleague who I mentioned, who joined us a couple of years ago for product, I've always made the same choice, which is I said, yes, I'll bring in the people where I have a personal relationship. It makes the business stuff easier. And at some point I knew it took about a year and a half in. My friend, his name is Nick Sakrasik. About a year and a half in, I was sitting in the conference room next to where I am right now. And I just flashed on like, whoa, Nick is angry at me. This is the moment I was afraid of. Nick was like telling me, Doug, you're doing this thing. And I could tell he was really upset and frustrated. And that was what I had been afraid of the whole time. I'm going to have my friend relationship and we're going to be fighting over some business thing. But in that situation, we were able to talk it out. And I think I pulled in my coach. I got some help from my coach to talk things through. And it was great. We worked everything out to our mutual satisfaction. And we're both working together today and enjoying it. And so I think the personal relationships to get started, I don't know how it would be possible without that. At a previous company before PayJoy, I also had people work with me who I had known before. And early stage startups are just really tough. And I think without some existing relationship, it's very easy for the professional relationship to break and fray and come apart. Whereas some existing relationship, it's more than just right here, right now. It's something longer. And I think that can help people stick together. There are quite a number of people, again, from the first 10 employees who I'd worked with, from Google, from MIT, undergrad, from all walks of life. And we knew each other. We knew each other too. So like they knew I wasn't some crazy, obnoxious idiot. And I knew they were reasonable, smart, hardworking people too. So I think that helped make it possible.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of people who were in the process of starting either funds or companies. And usually my comment is, you probably already know who you want to do this with, rather than doing founder dating, which can work sometimes, but it's easier if you do it with pre-existing relationships where there's a strong bond. Doug, how about the transition from an engineer, and I know this is a while ago, but from engineer to manager, CEO? How does that background inform you? What are obviously the benefits, but also maybe the challenges, right? Like what are the pitfalls that ex-engineers can have as business leaders?
Yeah. I mean, this is interesting. So I'd say probably my role models in this regard were like Larry Page, who I worked for at Google and got to speak with directly on at least one occasion. Bill Gates. I never worked at Microsoft, but he was kind of a role model for me growing up as like techie goes on to like build giant world-changing business. But there are definitely strengths and weaknesses to coming from that direction of tech engineering into management, founder, CEO role. The challenges for me, I think, were most acute maybe like 3 or 4 years in, is when I was stepping back from writing code myself. So the first couple of years I was writing code, And then I stepped back and I was kind of directing others where to go with it, when we're a 20, 30, 40 person company. And then as we grew beyond that, really, I wasn't writing code. I wasn't even reviewing the code. I wasn't even reviewing the technical design docs. I had to hire other people and trust them and not necessarily be 100% hands-off, but learn how to be a business leader instead of a tech leader. And I think that was a challenge for me where I'd say, oh, that should be easy. We should be able to code that up in 2 days. Why are you telling me it'll take 2 weeks? Right? And actually, tech is complicated. And, at my house, I've really enjoyed being a homeowner and getting to work on my house. And I thought, I'm going to install a ceiling fan in my bathroom. And there's the mechanical physical piece of cutting a hole in the ceiling, putting it in. There's the electrical, and then there's the ventilation. Each of those should take me like 2 hours. I'll do it tonight. Well, each of them took like an entire night of their own of 4 or 5 hours of me in the attic and in the ceiling and all that stuff. And I think the same is true there. So the problem is if I go in and say, that should be 2 days, like that's really insulting to people who are working on it and it takes 2 weeks. And if I was deep in the tech still, I might know that it's 2 weeks and know why. But there's that dangerous kind of valley in the middle where I come from tech and I want it to happen in 2 days, but I'm far enough away that I've lost sight of the actual details that make it take 2 weeks. And learning how to delegate and hire and agree on ownership and deliverables, those are the challenges. The benefits are, I think, coming from the tech allows me to stay close to some of it still. So PayJoy is built on mobile security. So we secure this phone so it's hard to jailbreak. And then we can lend money against the phone as collateral and actually pay us back better because they have said, I need to pay you in order to use this phone, whether that's for product number 1, which is buying the phone, or product number 2, which is credit line, credit card, credit for everything. But I think it helps me, like maybe 3 or 4 years into the company, we had the idea of creating our own security platform that we would license to the phone manufacturers. And that sounded crazy. What Motorola or Xiaomi or Huawei or Oppo, Vivo, any of these giant phone manufacturers, they're going to use our code? That sounds crazy. Why would they work with us? We're a tiny little startup. But we found one of them as a partner. I went to China together with a couple of our engineers, and we just sat down and coded version 1.0. And I certainly couldn't have done that if I hadn't been an engineer and had the confidence that I could do this if I was just an engineer. So let me step back to a role of tech lead and say, hey, let's 3 or 4 of us engineers go build this thing together and be willing to, for myself, sit at the computer and compile code for a few days to jumpstart this thing. I guess it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks, actually. See, it always takes longer than you expect. But I think that's the advantage. It helps you stay close to the core tech of what's going on. Overall, for me, I'll just add one more comment that's not really an advantage or a disadvantage, but just the path I took for me. I noticed some of what I struggle with. When I was an engineer, I was completely obnoxious, arrogant, full of myself. I thought, hey, I can do any engineering that needs to be done. Like, I can do it. Tier 1. I'm not saying I'm better than everybody, but I'm not behind anyone. Like, I'll go to toe with whatever needs doing. And I had that confidence. And that was me growing up as a techie, going through undergrad, MIT, grad school. Like, I'm here. I can do it. Whatever can be done, I can do it. Whatever can be built, I can build it. I felt that just rock solid core of confidence. For me, going into business was something that I felt like the world needed done. I saw a problem that something was broken in the world and needed doing. In this case, I told you about my African host family and hey, they don't have electricity. Not having electricity can have all these negative consequences. They need electricity. My friend knew a way to get them solar. Great. And now with PayJoy, all these people need phones. There are billions of people in the world who don't even have smartphones. If you don't have a smartphone today, you're getting left behind. Someone needs to go solve this thing. We have an idea that can get 1 billion people their smartphones. That was PayJoy 1.0. Get 1 billion people their smartphones. It needs doing. How come no one else is doing it? Okay, fine, I'll do it. That was me going into business. And interestingly, though, for me, I never had that same confidence. I grew up with engineering. I kind of went and said, hey, well, this thing needs to be done. I know the mission needs to be done. Let me go see what I can do. So for PayJoy, when we were starting, we built financial models that show up and to the right everything, like I'm sure every startup does in year 1. None of them came true, like the way we modeled them. But somehow year by year, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 10 steps forward, 2 steps back, up. It's not a smooth curve, but we got so much farther than we had any right to believe that we could get to. We're at over 400 million revenue this year, 50 million profit, like set to be more and more profitable. We could be doing 100 million profit next year. That's crazy to me thinking of it from years ago. But for me, what pulled me into the business side was just seeing a problem that needed doing and saying, I want to go make that happen. And connecting back to your earlier question on team, I think that helped recruit the team of people who believed in the mission. PayJoy is a mission-driven organization. So I'm saying, hey, no one else was doing it. So I grabbed this flag and said, this thing needs doing in the world. And then I kind of showed that flag to some of my friends, my classmates, other people I didn't know, and said, this is what we're doing at PayJoy. We want to get people access to financial services. We want to open the door to the modern financial system to a couple of billion people who are excluded from it right now. And there are a lot of other people who believed in that mission. And they said, yeah, I want to join PayJoy and make that happen. And so my brand of business leader, I'd say, is tied to, here's a mission. Here's something that needs doing in the world. We have the ability. Let's go make it happen.
You keep talking about this very ambitious vision, and that is to reach not 1 million, not 100 million, but 1 billion people. Obviously, you're step by step to get there. And now you're in 8 countries. Take us through that expansion across countries. What has driven you to enter these specific markets, and how have you modeled that international expansion?
Yeah. So the countries we're in today are Mexico, Panama, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, South Africa, and we just launched Philippines. It's very idiosyncratic and specific to the history of the path we followed. And so I think the takeaway I would share to other founders or people doing fintech is really experimenting and being open to changing and pivoting based on what the real world is telling you. So there's a little bit of interesting history. From about 2017 to 2020 at PayJoy, we tried an alternative business model that was licensing our technology to other lenders. The two technologies were the smartphone security and the smartphone credit scoring. Those were the 2 secret sauces we had that let us lend to customers in emerging markets. And in 2020, when the COVID pandemic hit, we found a lot of our licensing partners were really struggling. And we realized also it was hard to make money with that business model. It sounded great because it's technology licensing. So we're a tech company. We just sit back and write code here in San Francisco, and the whole world, we're gonna save the world by, like, everyone's gonna get access to credit. I have this incredible advisor. Let me give him a shout out by name, Gabriel Monjarez, who I met through the Stanford network. And he told me something in 2020. We got him as an advisor a few years before. And I was asking him about, we had these 2 businesses. We had the technology licensing business where we had countries. Your question was about the countries. We were licensing to tons of countries. We were licensing to lenders in a dozen countries across Africa, Latin America, Asia, all these things. But they were kind of struggling. They weren't for us, they weren't even super profitable. The businesses weren't super great. And we were running, our original business model was PayJoy as the lender. We had this kind of legacy old business in Mexico that we had been running with us as the lender. And we were thinking of spinning that off just to focus on the tech. And Gabe, my advisor, said, this business you have, as we showed him the business and kind of drew things on the whiteboard, he said, this business is really interesting. And you need to remember, there are no magic elves. And what does that mean? There are no magic elves. He said, look at this business. There are a lot of logistics. There are a ton of different pieces that need to happen for this lending business that you have in Mexico to succeed and to work well. We need to bring the capital. We need to underwrite the customer. We need to get the cash out. We need to partner with the retailers. We need to get cash in. We need to do the software security. We need to do the software UX, all these backend integrations, all the customer facing, the partners, all this stuff. And he said, there are no magic elves who will do it for you. And so in the tech licensing business, we were saying, we just want to do this one piece and everything else will work. It didn't work great. A lot of our tech partners didn't build an awesome lending business. There were just a handful that did. And when we looked at what was going on there, we found we really had to engage with them and partner with them and teach them our best practices. And then just a few got it. One of those was Adelantos, which was the one of our lending partners that we later acquired in 2021. And so after we pivoted back to that lending model of us being the direct lender. So to answer your question about other countries, we were licensing to lenders in all these different countries. We shut that down in 2020 and went back to our original business model of PayJoy as the lender. And so then it was kind of scary to shut down a whole bunch of business and say, we're going to just copy and paste what we have working in Mexico. So we continued scaling Mexico, and we copied and pasted to Brazil, and through that acquisition, Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, South Africa. And so why those countries? Our strategy at that time, we said, we want to look at countries that are big and easy. If they're really easy, and easy doesn't mean like the country is in some way inferior. It just means easy for us. So we did a lot in Latin America, where we said, we have something working, and something changes when you cross the border from one country to the other, but less changes when you're in the same continent, the same region, compared to when you cross oceans. So we did a bunch in LATAM, and the theory was what's working in Mexico can also work in Ecuador and Peru and maybe Brazil. Brazil's, in my mind, kind of half a continent away to adapt to the business environment, not just the language, but the business structure. More large retailers, large fintechs already tied up with retailers. There's something else to figure out. And then we said, let's also try big opportunities. Like the African continent is the fastest growing in the world today. There's 1 billion people in Africa who need what we're doing. We scoped out South Africa as the best market fit for us. And we had to do a bunch of adaptation. But I have belief that what we're doing applies kind of globally across the global South. LATAM, Africa, South Asia, including India, Southeast Asia, with Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam. Like, there are kind of 1 billion people in each of these regions who need what we're doing. So call that maybe 3 billion people, 3 to 4 billion people, 2 billion adults who are out of the credit system and need what we're doing. So long term, I think we want to be in all of those regions. And the question is just how fast can we reach them without getting distracted away from what we're doing right now? We looked at, just a quick aside, we looked at Nubank as an awesome proof point that you can build a valuable, successful lending business in Latin America. They're just today in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. We said, why do we need to go beyond 3 countries? We should build a giant, successful business in just 1 or 2 or 3 countries, right? But for us, back to the mission, our mission is, our motto is finance for the next billion. And that means there are these billions of people out in the world who need what we're doing. And so I want to keep advancing methodically a little bit without distracting us from strengthening the core business, but don't lose sight that there are 1 billion people in Africa who need what we're doing, 1 billion people in India, in Southeast Asia, and keep going there.
Going back a little bit to you shutting down that licensing business, it reminds me of, I hosted the CEO of Fundrise, and he was talking about a pivot they had, Ben Miller. They had a pivot where they lost half their revenue, but they were so sure that that wasn't the right direction, and they recovered and have more than overcome for that. How scary was that? I'm sure you experienced a revenue drop.
Oh, it was super scary. And as I think of it now, I'm thinking, we lost all these customers. And as I said, me as a business leader, I didn't know that it was the right call. All I could do was say, I think this thing isn't working and that thing looks like it would be better. Super scary to shut it down. But we did a couple of deep conversations with the leadership team where we each sketched out our vision for the company ahead and how we thought we could best succeed. And we each shared it to each other, and we put on our best active listening hats to understand, echo back to each other, make sure we understood. And we uncovered some things that we hadn't fully communicated with each other. And the biggest of those, I think, was from my co-founder, Gib, uncovered this point that there was a lot we were doing we were the elves. We were the magic elves who were doing a dozen different logistic things and putting and gluing it all together, doing all these different activities that are all necessary. And if you're missing one, the whole thing doesn't work very well. We were doing the integration to build a successful vertically integrated finance company. And there was a lot of value in that. And by keeping that, we keep the value. If we partnered with someone else, we had to teach them, and then they really didn't need us anymore. But it was super scary. I'll also just mention board directors were incredible from our investors. At the time, we'd done Series A and Series B. We had board directors from Union Square Ventures and Greylock. That was John Buttrick and Josh McFarland. And they've been so incredible to work with, where they said, even if it wasn't the choice they would have made themselves, like Greylock invested, and I remember telling them, this is a software business, right? So then, and this was just a year later, I'm telling them, I think we need to pivot. And I remember Josh telling me that he supported me, just as John did. We support you. If you believe this is the way, they said, we're not as close to the business. We don't know what way it's going to succeed, but we believe in you. And just having supporters like that was a really special privilege that I'm still grateful for very much today.
Talk about having a good investor on board. Doug, you recently changed a little bit the company structure. You became a public benefit corporation. Maybe tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So let me start with what is it, and then how different people perceive it and why I wanted to do it. So what is it? It really just means, this is like your listeners may have heard of B Corps, or this is my journey. I had heard of B Corp vaguely as a thing. I think it's B Labs, a private nonprofit that created this certification where they will certify you as a B Corp. What does that mean? I think it's analogy to C Corp is a corporate structure you can use, but it was just a private kind of nonprofit stamp of approval. So the state of Delaware a few years ago created their official corporate certification for a public benefit corp. And really what it means is you just refile your certificate of incorporation. You're still a C Corp, but we also became a public benefit corp with the state of Delaware and get that extra stamp. Really all that means is we put our mission into our corporate charter at the end of, I think it's section 1. It says, PayJoy exists for the purpose of bringing underserved people in emerging markets into the modern financial system. And the board directors shall consider that in making decisions in addition to their fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. That's all it is. It says, here's our mission. And actually the board is required to consider that. So some people could say, well, what's the point of that? That has no teeth. That has no meaning for anything. Why do I care? I think it actually has a little bit of teeth, and it gives me confidence for the future. I mean, my dream come true is that PayJoy will be around for decades ahead, long after I'm gone. I don't have to be here until I die, and I'll be gone someday anyway. But I would love for PayJoy 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now to be serving hundreds of millions of customers. 1 billion. Let's reach actually that number, 1 billion. They're out there. There are 3 billion people who need what we're doing. Let's go make it happen. And it could always change in the future. But I like putting that stamp there that says, this is what the company is about. All the way up to the board directors need to keep this in mind. And if we had evil board directors who were purely just money focused to begin with, I think they might have been concerned about it. And they each have their own take. But I think they all see the value of PayJoy as a mission-driven company. And so it supports the value of why people join the company, why employees join us. And it helps make it clear as well to people that we are really trying to be the good guys in this industry. Because in an area like this, like lending to the poor, it's hard to tell who's exploiting the poor and making them poorer and who's helping them. It's not always clear. And we have a lot we do to make sure that we're improving our customers' lives. And for example, in no segment of our customers ever will we allow most people to be defaulting and getting hurt by PayJoy. We want to make sure the vast majority are improving their financial outcomes in life. That's not always clear to people just when they enter the industry. I mean, Mohammed Yunus, founder of Grameen Bank, and the amazing work they did there, I think that was clear to people. This is all nonprofit. This is helping people do better. But then you have kind of a decade later, all these suicides of people who fell deeply in debt. And I think it was really a black eye for the industry, for the concept of microfinance. And so it's not just a PR greenwashing kind of thing, But I would say, we spoke earlier, I lived in a mud hut in Africa. And from that experience, I've really focused a good chunk of my life on connecting technology to the underserved. It's really important for me to make clear to our employees, to our customers, to our investors, what are we about? We're about doing something good for our customers. We're about making people's lives better. And so that's what becoming a public benefit corporation, in a way, it's no different than like if I write a slogan on my t-shirt here, what does that change? I wrote something on my t-shirt, but it makes it clear to everyone what we are doing, what we're about. And so I think it helps build energy and belief in our mission. And that makes us stronger and helps us get the best employees and customers understand us and the right investors understand us. So for me, it's really about defining who we are and making that clear to everybody.
I can tell you're very passionate about this topic, so I'm glad I asked. Doug, before I let you go, are there any books you recommend often that you enjoy, that you've enjoyed throughout the last few years?
I'll admit to you, I'm a little embarrassed. I really can't read business books anymore. And sometimes investors or friends pass me a business book, or I'm talking to people and they mention some cool business book. I'll order it and it just sits on my bedside table until I give it away 6 months later. But with kind of the creation of, I would say, real AI in the last couple of years, something reminded me, I think I read an article of this book called Eon by Greg Bear, that's science fiction, that I read probably in the early 90s. And it's just really interesting. It really anticipated some of the real science fiction future of AI. And so I picked that one up again a couple months ago, and it was fun to go back in time, but also go forward in time and imagine how things may be.
I'll have to check it out. More and more guests have been recommending science fiction books, which I like. Well, Doug, thanks so much. Outstanding conversation. Love to hear your story, which is, of course, the story of PayJoy. And thanks for dedicating this time to us. I know it's just the beginning for you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this great episode with Doug, CEO of PayJoy. If you want more interviews, make sure to subscribe, follow, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. It helps and truly means a lot. And if you have any suggestions or thoughts about the show, just drop me a line on Twitter or LinkedIn. Signing off till next week, I'm your host, Miguel Armaza.